Hey everybody, Yost Coast is here, waiting on MrCologne76 to join us. I'm glad you guys took time out of your day to stop by, because it's going to be cool. Let's wait for people to join. Alan, how you doing? Good to see you. Mr. Cologne is here. Sagai, what's up, buddy? What's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
Good to see you.
Same here, same here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. I'm waiting for a few more people to join so we get a little good group going on here. How was your day today?
Right. It was well. I work during the day as a registered nurse, so today was a busy day, but it's what I signed up for when I started doing nursing. So I'm glad to be kicking back and to let somebody else put on a show, and I just come enjoy it.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to have you on. I need to pick your brain a little bit. How long have you been in RN? That's what I want to know first off.
I'm 43. I graduated nursing school at 21, so about 22 years.
Wow, that's amazing. You still love it?
Still love it.
That's incredible, man.
Still love it.
Now, I have to address the elephant in the room, that gorgeous, magnificent beard you have.
Thanks, man.
It's so well trimmed. It's so well shaved. I'm jealous.
Yeah, I had J-Bit Fragrance Reviews on this weekend on one of my shows, and he had a pretty long beard, and I cut mine down from time to time because as a nurse, you don't want to look too rugged and too outlandish. Sure. So I try to keep it groomed because of that. Otherwise, it probably would have been longer. Understandable.
Well, it looks great. I'm jealous. I don't think I'll ever have the patience or the time to want to do that. So I respect you for that. But we've got a good group here. So let's kind of touch base. Who are you? What are you doing here on Instagram? Why have you gotten so successful? I want to know what drove you to start this whole Instagram craze and get, as big as you did.
Well, obviously, the first thing I need to put my drink down here real quick. Was my love of fragrances. That is what drove me to social media. When I spent some time in the military, and when I was in the military, my education on what was out, what people was wearing, I just went to the exchange on base and said, hey, what's new? And I would get the updated stuff, and that's how I kind of had my collection. When I got out the military, I no longer had access to the PX, and I started getting on YouTube. I wanted to see what people were wearing, and I discovered there was these fragrances I had never heard of. Started getting them, started buying them. I was in Facebook groups, and there wasn't a real brotherly vibe in the Facebook groups. And I subsequently stopped using Facebook. I just was like, I'm done with social media. I was done. And one of my friends kept saying, man, you got to get on Instagram. You got to get on Instagram. I know you like taking pictures of your bottles of fragrances. Get on Instagram. And I was like, no, I'm done. Instagram is for young kids. I'm past that. And he kept pestering me. So I finally got on there, and Instagram started off being just my life, my dog, food, travel, bourbon, whatever, I would put on there. And of course, a big part of that was fragrances, because that's been my thing for a long time. Sure. And one day a company reached out to me and said, hey, we want to send you some samples. And I was like, whoa, okay. All right, no worries. And that kept happening. And I was like, I kind of like the community that I have found on Instagram.
Amazing community.
And I just started really just reaching out to people, and this movement started happening. And fast forward today, and we are here. And what I wanted to do more than anything else was to lead by example, was to develop a community of people that got along, because I started in the Facebook groups, there was a lot of riff-raff, and there was this hierarchy where if you weren't part of the big dogs, you weren't anything. And I wanted to lead a community where if you just joined Instagram yesterday with 2 followers, you could come talk to me. I'm going to respond to you. I'm going to treat you like a human being. And I think that is one of the things that is partly responsible for me being in the position that I am in right now.
Now, I remember you and I spoke probably 6 or 8 months ago, and I remember you, and it still to this day sticks in my head. You said when people think of unboxing and new fragrance reviews, they want to think MrCologne76. So, you still feel that way?
I mean, I share the limelight, so to speak, but every day, I get 1 or 2 messages of people saying, hey, Mr. Cologne, either I bought this because I heard you talking about it, or I bought this because you sent me some samples and I fell in love with it and I decided to get it. And those messages come from all over the world. Yeah. I have sent stuff to almost every continent there is. And it just really makes me nice to know that I can inspire somebody else to enjoy something that I find pleasing.
Now, you've been in fragrances. How long have you been doing this Instagram? How long have you been really making this a thing?
Probably a little over 2 years.
Now, did it all start taking off when your Scent Provoking Sunday happened? Is that what kind of was your like tipping point?
It's hard to say what the tipping point was. I feel Scent Provoking Sunday came about after I had already started grinding, because Scent Provoking Sunday was born out of me having a legit question one weekend. I sat on my couch and I recorded this video. I sometimes go back and look at it and laugh. And it was just like, hey, what do you guys think of this scenario? The question was, as a man, how do you feel about complimenting another man about a fragrance? Mm-hmm. And I had really good conversation. And I told my girl, I was like, you know what? I want to do this again next Sunday. So I did it again, and that was the birth. So I already had a pretty engaged following, and because I got really good response and feedback to that question, I continued doing it. So I was already grinding, so to speak, when Scent Provoking Sunday came about.
Now, I think, excuse me, now you choose a different topic every Sunday. What is the basis of that? What are you trying to provoke? What are you trying to get people to talk? Are you wanting them to talk about a certain fragrance or an experience? What is driving your Scent Provoking Sunday?
It's usually topics that revolve around fragrances and topics that really get people talking. We've touched some really touchy subjects like niche versus designers. We've touched clones. We've touched the cost of perfumes. We've touched compliments. And it's usually something I wanted to create a forum for people to really engage in a conversation. And that is what I've always strived to do on Scent Provoking Sunday. So it's always related to fragrances, but what are we thinking? What is our opinion? How do we handle this?
Now, here's what I feel is kind of weird. Now, granted, with my shave market, we're in a little bit of a different, little different ends of the spectrum here, but the shave market is very oversaturated. And, at this point, they're trying to outdo each other with, whether it's a better formula or really good packaging or something. At this point, what to you makes you spray a fragrance or smell a fragrance and be like, wow, that really amazes me? Because at some point it all kind of becomes the same. So, what really stood out to you to really make a difference, and why do you think that is?
There's a couple of things. The first thing is a feeling. When I've smelled a lot of fragrances, and you smell a fragrance and you're just like, wow. A novel experience to my nose. A novel experience to my nose. Is it something that I haven't smelled before?
Yeah.
That is the preponderance of what makes that experience happen. The next thing is, how does it smell like quality? Like you start you start being able to discern quality versus non-quality when you smell a lot of fragrances
100%.
and when you smell fragrances at different points of the spectrum. Are there some fragrances of lesser quality that smell good? Absolutely.
Sure.
But for the most part, does it smell like it's a quality fragrance? And is it a novel experience to my nose? If I smell something that, you know, I'm less encouraged, I'm less enthused, less excited about something that's like reminiscent of another smell.
Sure, like a dupe of some sort?
Not necessarily a dupe, but there are fragrances that I smell like, again, I've smelled a lot of fragrances and I smell them and I go, and sometimes it takes several occasions before I go, this smells like such and such.
Yeah.
All right. Now, sometimes I'm happy in those scenarios. Recently, I had a fragrance from the House of Bois 1920. It's called Ultramare. It smells very similar to Chanel Mademoiselle. Now, I love Mademoiselle, but I don't own it. So I'm quite happy with that. But when I get something that smells quite similar, it's a little bit redundant in my collection. So
you're looking for something unique, something that stands out, something that's outside of the box. I'm sure you've had quite some experience between having something that was amazing and somebody trying to do something outside the box that just didn't work. And I've always made the joke that wet shaving is kind of the gateway drug to fragrances, because there's a lot of people I've met through your community that I'm now good friends with who have often said, I started as wet shaving and I saw what they were doing, and I see companies putting in the effort and distilling their own fragrances and using hydrosols and stuff. And I'm just now starting to get, like you said, you smell so much. Same with the shave soap, and for lack of a better term, I feel like I'm a shave soap connoisseur. You can discern the differences between the soaps. And, at the end of the day, they all get the job done, just like colognes. They all make you smell a certain way. But there's just the ones that make you go, wow, that really stood out. It was different than everything else on the market. And some of these fragrances that I have, like you said, they're just kind of, they get the job done. They smell okay. But then you get the ones that they really put the effort into. And there's a company called Bear Stearns Man. Don't know if you've heard of them. Another one, Phoenix Artisan Accoutrements. And a lot of the other smaller houses too, they'll try and go outside the box and try and make something new instead of just doing a cologne dupe, which is, safe, I guess. But I'm getting to the point now where I'm getting sick of the cologne dupes. I want that outside the box, experience. And they're starting to really hit that, and that's cool. But there's so much going on. There's so much chemistry that I don't understand. I don't know the difference between an EDT and an EDP and a fragrance oil and a hydrosol. And, but I just know it works. I know it lasts a long time, but I don't know why. And I just am curious too, like if somebody wants to get a good fragrance, not necessarily go to Macy's and buy something, but how do you determine what's good based on, what's the difference between an EDT and an EDP?
Well, those differences have to do with the concentration of perfume oil. I want to say an EDT has 23 or 24% of perfume oil. Then you get to EDP. And I could be wrong on the numbers, but it has to do with the concentration of the perfume oil in the fragrance. So you have, EDT, EDP, pure perfume. So the higher up in concentration you get is the more of that perfume that you will smell, in the fragrance. However, for example, Mason Francis Kurtjaw has a fragrance called Baccarat Rouge 540. He has an X straight and he has an EDT, or he has actually EDP, right? So he has EDP and EX straight. There was a huge debate about which one was better. I sampled the heck out of them. I had a lot of conversations. And what happens is in an EDP, you have less of the perfume oil than an X straight. Okay. So you have more alcohol in an EDP. Right? Okay. So when you spray both these fragrances, the one with more alcohol is going to proliferate more. It's going to give off more sillage initially. But once you get past that initial blast and the fragrance settle, now you're left with the concentrations of the oil on your skin.
Yeah.
And that is what is going to carry you through the day. That's what really mattered to me. I wasn't so concerned with what I was getting off the skin when I first put it on. So I ended up going with the X straight. I really, really enjoy the fragrance. They smell very similar, but that one smelled a little creamier to me, a little more rich. In regards to the question you asked about quality and being able to tell, that is something that is constantly shifting.
Sure.
Okay.
Always evolving.
It's if you started off buying, $10 bottles of wine at the supermarket, and you were throwing that back in college, and then you got a little further in life and you started going to a wine store, perhaps you started getting a wine subscription, or you started going on wine tours, your palate changes.
Yeah, definitely.
Typically, you also get more educated on whatever that is, be it wet shaving, be it bourbon, be it scotch, be it fragrances, be it cigars. So you start getting more educated on the aspects that make it quality. So it's not just the smell sometimes, it's knowing your perfume houses.
Getting to know, because a lot of people, they know their consistency. And, I can name 3 houses, 3 companies off the top of my head that when somebody says, hey, like I said, I get messages all the time, not necessarily just on how the soap performs, but scent. Now, of course, scent is subjective, but they want to know how it projects, how long it lasts. And I can tell you off the top of my head, the top 3 that I can immediately say, if somebody says they want to smell good all day, it's boom, boom, boom. And somebody says, well, I prefer the lighter fragrances. And that's the thing, too, is I've noticed a lot of wet shavers in general like the stronger fragrances. Most of them do. They like the projection. They like the fact that when they walk into a room, people notice. And I think that's kind of why it is kind of a gateway drug to fragrances. I've just got so much time and investment in my shave stuff. I haven't had the luxury to go into the niche houses. Now, you've messaged, and I think you've actually interviewed Chatillon Luxe, Sean from Chatillon Luxe, correct?
Yes.
And so he was probably the first perfume maker I've ever actually met face to face. And it was kind of neat to talk to him and, and how he ties memories to scents and vice versa. And I think that's what's really cool because, do you find yourself tying fragrances to memories as well?
All the time. And that has changed because my tastes in perfumes have changed. I used to be a designer perfume wearer predominantly, only. And within the last couple of years, I now wear mainly niche perfumes. So a lot of the stuff that I'm wearing these days, they don't have that history from memories. So they're more recent in my life. Yeah. But the memories are usually associated with how did I come to get that bottle? Where did I buy it? I travel a lot and I like to punctuate my travel with souvenirs, perfume souvenirs. So a lot of my fragrances, they represent a particular trip. Quite a few of them were just blind buy on Facebook when I was like really building my collection. But a lot of my fragrances are tied to travel, and that's the kind of memories they hold.
Interesting. Now, I'm sure you probably have a lot, but are there a few that really stand out to you even to this moment that, like, if I asked you and said, hey, I'm going to come over to your house, I want you to pull out your top 3 for me and let me smell them. Do you already have something in mind that, like, is your go-to stuff?
I don't really have go-to fragrances. I get asked that question a lot. At some point, you start having a lot of loves. And at some point, you start really breaking your collection down. So what I do have is I have my favorite chocolate fragrance. I have my favorite amber fragrance. I have my favorite vanilla. So it's really hard to just name 3. I have 2 fragrances that if the house was on fire and I had to grab 2, that would be Chanel Platinum Egoiste. Okay. And it would be L'air de Dessert Marocain by Andy Tower. Those are my 2 favorite perfumes, one niche, one designer. They're not my best perfumes. They're not my best, but the Chanel Platinum, I've worn that fragrance since I was about 22 years old. I've always had it in my collection. And L'air de Dessert Marocain was a fragrance that really opened my eyes to niche perfume. And it's an incredible fragrance, and it just means a lot to me. And that would be the one I would grab, those 2 fragrances.
Interesting. So are you finding that the niche houses are more attractive just because they're going outside the box or because they don't have a voice?
A couple of reasons. I like the artistry in perfume. And what I mean by that is not just making the perfume, but making the perfume that tells a story.
Exactly.
I really get into that. I start geeking out and stuff like that. The other thing that's happened is I've been able to develop personal relationships with some of these perfume houses.
Absolutely.
And personal relationships are more valuable than anything else in this world.
100%.
And that gives you a greater deal of appreciation. I can call them. That gives me a greater deal of appreciation. So yes, they go outside the box. Designer fragrances, they typically make crowd-pleasing fragrances. So they're designed, no pun intended, for everyone to like them. Niche perfumes aren't like that. Niche perfumes, they're made for some people to like, and typically they appeal to people with a greater appreciation. So it's not that they're better, they just appeal to different people.
True. So, and like you were touching on it, and you said about the relationship aspect, and that's kind of what has been with the wet shaving too is, and I think that it lacked, at least on Instagram, it lacked. I know I'm sure with perfumes, but same with wet shaving. There's Reddit, there's Facebook, all that stuff. But I found on Instagram, there was something lacking within the past couple of years. Instagram just wasn't touching on it. So I started something, I built something, but then I said, you know what? There's people behind making this stuff. And I said, what better to want to buy something to get to know the person behind it and get to know their story, what drove them to want to do it, what wanted to make it different. And I think, if anything, you said you create these great relationships, but you also get to experience something that's amazing from a smaller person. And I think you can appreciate that much more when you know it's just whether it's a husband and a wife or just, whatever, when they're working in their basement and they're making the stuff, you just really appreciate the time and effort they put into it versus something that's mass produced that you can buy on, on a store shelf. And I think that's cool, especially I'm assuming the fragrance market is way more saturated than the shave soap, but it's the same type of deal. And, bringing light to that, or bringing you on, or bringing Will, like I had Will from Vera Stern Man yesterday, one of the most successful shave soap companies. You put a face to a name, you make them drop their defenses, they talk about themselves, and you get to really interview the real human being behind it and why they did it. And I think that's what's cool. I think that's what's cool about the internet and Facebook and, and everything. You just kind of get to bring people together, and that creates a stronger community.
Absolutely.
So is there fragrances that you're looking forward to? I don't know how the fragrance market works. With the shave soap, you've got something in the works, you got the teasers, you got the hype build, you got a few testers out there posting their photos of the day, and this hype gets built. Is there something like that with fragrances also?
Not so much with niche perfumes. I'm always looking forward to trying new things. There's always something new either being sent to me or I'm going to go get at a store. I'm getting ready to go to Essence in Milan next month, one of the biggest niche perfume shows in the world.
Right.
And I plan on meeting quite a few brands that I have collaborated with, but some new brands to me. So I am going to the biggest Toys R Us for perfumes. So yeah, there's quite a lot that I'm going to be able to check out, because I may have one fragrance from a perfume house, but now I'm going to get to meet the perfumer or the brand CEO and sniff the entire collection. It doesn't get any more epic than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I'm changing subjects real quick. This was quite a while ago. Somebody asked, what made you decide to trim and shape your beard the way you did?
My barber.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Clean.
I go to the barber once a week, usually on Fridays. And the barber, well, actually, I go to a couple of different barbers, but there had been a time where I had a lapse of 2 months of not going to the barber. And I was seriously Wolfman. And I went in there and he shaped it up sort of similar to this. And that's been kind of the shape I've maintained. Occasionally, it will kind of get maybe more narrow, or maybe more short and more wide. But this is kind of the shape that the barbers, cut.
Man, you got a good barber.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you use to prep? Do you use anything in particular that you really like to maintain? Do you use any beard oil or beard balm or anything?
For the past 2 years, I've been using a product that my girlfriend makes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what she puts in it. I was with her on one occasion, and I actually put a couple of different oils in a couple of different ones to create a couple of different scents. So I had one that had like a dare musk with some oud oils, and then we had one that had like vanilla and rose. So I get oils in from time to time, and it's nice to have a nice fragrance on my beard because at work I'm wearing the surgical mask. So when I have that beard oil, with the beard balm, it just creates a nice little, party under my mask, and it's just
Exactly.
really, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, over the years you've been smelling fragrances, is there certain fragrance or scent notes that you tend to gravitate towards?
Yeah, I am an Oriental or Floriental, which is a subclass of Orientals. I like gourmands. That is kind of my sweet spot. I have expanded my palette tremendously with this journey. In fact, a few days ago, I pulled out a bunch of fragrances that are, for the want of a better word, springtime fragrances. And I'm making a personal goal to wear them a little bit more in the next couple of weeks, because left up to my devices, I'll go for the heavy stuff all year long. Like, I just love dark, resinous, boozy fragrances.
Do you tend to change your fragrances as the seasons change?
Not really. I live in Texas currently, and in the middle of the summer, it gets to be, over 100 degrees, sometimes for over 100 days.
Sure.
I don't do a whole lot outside when it's that hot. So I'm in the air condition somewhere. So I have a little bit more latitude in what I can wear. And at work, I work in surgery. It's freezing at work, literally freezing. So that gives me a little bit more leverage. Like, my work temperature is the same year long.
Sure.
Winter, summer, spring.
But you're in a controlled environment.
Yeah. So, if I'm going to a pool party, yeah, my fragrance choice will be different. I wouldn't wear something with heavy amber or musk in the middle of summer outdoors. But for every day in the house, there isn't a whole lot of difference in what I wear year long. I have a handful of fragrances that I feel smell better when it's extremely cold. But outside of that, I have flexibility, I feel.
Okay. There was one comment you made a couple weeks ago on a post, and I actually messaged you about it. You were saying something about you had put a perfume or a cologne on or something, and you didn't think you liked it, but over time you grew an appreciation for it, and you really started to like it. What made you change your mind? What do you think makes you change your mind to immediately be put off, or not necessarily put off, but not necessarily care for something, but then all of a sudden you're like, man, I really like this?
A couple of things. One is sometimes I'm quick to jump to a decision when I first smell a fragrance. I don't give it time. A fragrance is like a song. You have a beginning, the middle, and the end. And if you make a decision about liking or disliking a fragrance only by hearing the intro, you could be wrong.
True.
So there have been times, many times, I smell something and I make a decision either one way or the other only on the opening. And what happens is, perfume houses, they send me stuff, and I feel like it's my responsibility to really try something a few times before I say, I don't like it.
True. And that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So I get a fragrance. In fact, I'm looking at one on my counter right now. I get a fragrance. I put it on. It might be something in the opening that just doesn't sit well with me. I don't like the notes. I don't like the blend. And, I say, no, I don't like it. And then I try it again. Well, if I get past that opening, sometimes you get to a point in the fragrance, you're like, this is nice. Yeah. And that happens very, very often. So that's why I tell people, sample something and, give it time. I always tell people, if you don't like something, try it again in a few months, because your taste will change. My taste now isn't what it was 4 years ago. I appreciate things now that I didn't appreciate 4 years ago. So the combination of taste changing and getting tricked with the opening is responsible for me sometimes having a change of heart on a fragrance. So
taking the human aspect out of it and saying these personal relationships, same with the wet shaving community. I have a lot of the personal cell numbers of the artisans. or I message them at the drop of a hat. But, you know, when you have something sent to you, whether it's from somebody you know or not, do you take that relationship out of it and judge it based on solely what it is? Do you buy with your eyes? You know, when somebody sends you something and says, hey, I got something new I want you to try, are you automatically judging it before you smell it?
No. Here's a couple of examples. I love Imaginary Authors. They're my favorite indie brand, okay? Imaginary Author's last fragrance, Whispered Myths, he sent it to me, and I didn't like it. And him and I talked about it. Now, I'm going to try it a few more times. I've only tried it like twice, and I didn't like it. So I love that brand, but I didn't like that fragrance.
Yeah. Another
good example, Bruno Fazzolari. I met Bruno Fazzolari. Actually, I've met both Josh and Bruno Fazzolari. He sent me a fragrance called it's a vetiver fragrance. I forgot the exact name. I'm not a vetiver lover. It's a very vetiver dominant fragrance.
Sure.
I didn't like it. So it happens where I get perfumes from companies that I have really good relationships with, but not every fragrance is for me, unfortunately.
Well, of course. And like I said, that goes back to sense of subjective. Now, do you believe that there has anything to do with your chemistry or your chemical makeup or your DNA to where if I spray the same cologne on you and the same cologne on me, that it's going to smell different? Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think there's some truth to it, but I put very little stock in that belief. I just, and I've had perfumers tell me that it is a thing. Chemistry matters. I think more than anything, other stuff that you have in your body may matter, like, you know, the type of soap you use or the type of lotion, maybe your hydration status. Is your skin dry? Is this fragrance being sucked up by your skin so we're only smelling certain notes? Mm-hmm. I think that has more stock than chemistry and I hear people all the time say, I can't wear XYZ. It smells like this on me. And I'm just like, well, is it smelling like that on you, or is that what you're smelling when you wear it? Yeah. Because there's a difference in the way we experience a fragrance when it's on us and when somebody wears it.
Do you feel that if you wore a fragrance that necessarily you didn't care for, but you got 10 compliments walking past people, would you continue to wear it?
If I didn't care for it, I wouldn't wear it. If I didn't. Now, I've got fragrances that I'm not over the moon about. For example, Mancera's Cedrat Boisé. I blind bought that because there was a lot of hype. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, let's check it out, see if it's any good. I got it. I wore it to work. I got like 5 compliments the first couple hours of work. I'm not over the moon about that fragrance. It's a nice fragrance, but it doesn't bring me that much joy.
Sure.
But every time I wear it, I get a lot of compliments. But if I didn't like it, at this point, I either give it away or I don't wear it at all.
Okay. So everything that you have pretty much behind you, is that stuff that you continue to wear, or is that just kind of part of your collection?
The stuff behind me is stuff that was recently added to my collection. So a lot of this stuff, I'm currently testing or wearing or creating content with. And I got tired of having to go into my collection and search for things. So I got this so that, I have a place to, what we're doing right now, record stuff. Sometimes I take pictures right there on the shelf. Mm-hmm. So that was the main reason why I got this.
Okay.
It was a lot easier than, every time I wanted to take a picture of something that was new in my collection, have to go hunt for it. And then the other thing is, as part of Scent Provoking Sunday, some of my winners, I give sample packs. And I like giving sample packs of fragrances that are new to me because oftentimes they're new perfumes to the community.
Sure.
So by keeping them right here, it's easier to make samples. It makes my life a little easier than going and digging for them.
So as far as the wet shaving community goes, and like I said, I know you're kind of not really into that, but there again, the fragrances are what's kind of relatable here. So you're telling me if somebody necessarily buys a soap or an aftershave and they don't necessarily care for the fragrance, give it a few tries, see how it projects, see if you end up establishing an appreciation for it. Like, for instance, I don't have much experience with the niche perfumes, But Chantilly Luxe had sent me his lamplight pennants. I did a lot of his marketing for him, and immediately smelling it off of the bottle, I didn't like it. I don't know, it burned my nose, and it was offensive. But there was something, and like this is kind of a marketing term, but the magic is in the dry down. So what do you think causes that dry down difference? Is it because it's getting a chance to kind of open up and evaporate and allow the fragrance to release? What is the difference between smelling it out of the bottle and putting it on your skin?
Typically when you smell something, either, on a scent strip, or you just sprayed it and you smell in the nozzle, you're experiencing the top notes of the fragrance. Top notes are chemically different than base notes. They're smaller molecules, so they evaporate faster, and that's what you're smelling.
Okay.
The dry down is your base notes. So those molecules are larger, they last longer. Put it this way, if you were to wear fragrance, you put it on your body, you put your shirt on, you walk out the door, and you pass someone in the hall, and like, you smell good, what's that?
Yeah.
That's your top notes. Top notes will be gone in about 30 minutes to 2 hours. They're gone. Then you have the heart of the fragrance, which is what lasts all day long at work. People are like, oh my God, you smell good. What is that? That would last anywhere from 2 hours to 6 to 8 hours.
Okay.
Then you have your base notes that would last anywhere upwards of 8 hours, sometimes all the way to 24 hours, even beyond. Your base notes is you've been gone for the entire day. You take the shirt off to put it in the hamper, and you can still smell your fragrance. So that's your base note. That's your dry down.
Interesting.
So that is why a fragrance can smell radically different in the dry down. In regards to the fragrance that you mentioned, the the Chatillon Luxe, that particular fragrance, I enjoyed more in the sillage than smelling it on my skin. I went to a fair and I met Sean, and his fragrance dominated the lobby area and it smelled beautifully, but I didn't like it on my skin like this.
Sure.
And some fragrances are like that. They smell better in the sillage version.
So that's funny. I learned a lot just in the last few sentences when you were talking about the base, the heart, and the top notes. I never looked at it that way. I never understood what that meant. I never understood that's how it worked. But for instance, a buddy of mine, I don't think he's on here right now, Ariana and Evans make something called Asian Plum. And it's like plum, vanilla, tobacco, and plumera. Right off the smell of the soap or the aftershave, it just kind of has a fruity, just off-putting smell. But then after about 4 hours of wearing it, it kind of dries down, and then I get this really warm tobacco and a subtle vanilla, and I'm like, I'm doing that all day, and it smells good, and I like it. And so that kind of explains now the difference between, the top, the heart, and the base notes, and I never really understood that.
Yeah, and just by listening to you describe the fragrance, I had a good idea of what you would have experienced, because you start learning where notes are placed in a fragrance pyramid. You start learning which notes are tops and middles and bases. And it's not always that way. You can have a base note as a top because it's all relative to each other in the pyramid. But typically, your base notes are your bergamot, citruses, and stuff like that. Your vanilla is your heart. And then your base notes are your woods, your sandalwoods, oud, leather, musk, and stuff like that.
Stuff that's going to carry and continue to project.
Exactly.
Now, do you know anything about the difference between hydrosols and fragrance oils?
That hydrosol is something new to me. I don't know anything about it.
The only person that I know that does that currently is Phoenix Artisan Accoutrements. He distills all his own fragrances, and he uses hydrosols. And from what I understand, from what little knowledge I have, is that hydrosol is a much higher, whether it's a concentration or it's a more pure form of the fragrance, but anything that I have from him that I put on, I know for a fact I'm going to smell it upwards of 8, 12 hours later, compared to when somebody else uses just a fragrance oil. But there are times where it is only fragrance oil, but I still get almost very similar length as far as the longevity of how long it projects. And I just didn't understand, is it the quality of the fragrance oil? Is it the way they process it? Is it what makes the difference? And that's what's kind of cool about experiencing it. And so, like I said, the hydrosol, whatever that means, I really don't know, but I just know if I put something on from him, I'm going to smell it all day long.
How many fragrances does he have?
He's probably got 50 or so different scents.
Oh, wow.
I'll send you a link to some of his stuff, but like there again too, there was something here called Will-o'-the-Wisp. I don't have all the stuff in front of me, but there's like absinthe and fruit flavors and stuff like that in this. And I don't know what, at first when you smell it, it's really fruity, but putting this on, I don't know, it does something to me. I put it on and it's intoxicating, and it kind of just takes me to a place because I feel like I smell good. It makes me feel important, and I feel like, I guarantee you, I walk into a restaurant or a bar or anywhere, and I'm going to smell different than anybody else in the room, and I like that. I like that I stand out, and that's kind of why I think the wet shaving is kind of a gateway drug, because these guys are trying to do what the niche perfume houses are doing. So that's why I wanted to bring you on, is just kind of pick your brain and understand the chemistry behind it. And if anything, the most important thing I can take away tonight is your description of the notes and how they project. And I think that's really cool. I think people really appreciate that.
No worries. What is the concentration of that fragrance that you just picked up? I'm just curious.
I honestly don't know.
Is it a EDT? Like, does it say like?
Most people, when they say aftershave splash, they'll say aftershave splash. This one says aftershave and cologne. So this one, and he charges probably $10 on average more than anybody else for an aftershave bottle. Granted, it's a beautiful bottle. Nobody puts this kind of effort, and it's very, very, very distinct. It's a Phoenix Artisan Accoutrement bottle when you see it, but you're paying for whatever he's doing with the process of distilling the fragrance. And like with the John From, Kava Kava's in there, and he was trying to distill something from it, but got the hydrosol, but not the oil, and whatever it is, and it's still on my fingers right now. But something about his, if you buy his, it's going to project all day long. Not saying you're going to like it, but the longevity is there. So whatever his process is, whatever he's doing, is making it last all day. And that's what's really cool. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are chasing is that, they want to do the shaving, and they want to put the aftershave on, and they want to smell it all day long. And I don't blame them. So somebody who maybe be starting into niche fragrances, where would you recommend somebody start other than just do what you did, where you were blind buying stuff? Do you have certain companies that you know and recommend and trust that you would say, hey, start here and work your way up?
Sure. The best place to start if you're trying to get into niche is if you have a store where you live. If you have a store, I always tell people, go make friends with the sales associates. You don't have to buy anything, get educated, get samples, go home. Try stuff on, come back and buy something. They will bless you with more samples. In the absence of that, because not everyone has the ability to go to a store, find a few reviewers that you can identify with and start getting samples. I tell most people that come to me, they can go to Door Perfume. It's, DOR Perfume in California. There's Perfumology on the East Coast. There's Crystal Fragrance. Crystal Fragrance is a godsend to the niche perfume community. She's a small, independent, online retailer. She sells, decants. So a decant is essentially a bottle of perfume that someone sprayed into smaller bottles. So you don't have to go buy a whole bottle. You can buy 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 mLs and try. So, you can go to Crystal Fragrance. There's Beverly Hill Perfumery in Beverly Hills, California. Another great store that I've been to. And those are predominantly the retailers. There's Oswald's in New York. So those are places that are tried and true. There's Fumery PDX in Portland, right? But find a few reviewers that you can identify with. And when they make a list or they make recommendations, try to get a sample. And you're going to find connections to those, reviewers. You're going to find reviewer A, he mentioned, several of these fragrances. I tried them and I liked 8 out of 10. So I'm going to start paying attention to what he is saying or she is saying. Then you have another reviewer and they have a list. And then if you start seeing fragrances being mentioned by several of the reviewers you can relate to, then it's a fragrance that you can seek out.
Okay.
You know? So that's what I did in the early days. I just, I literally sat down with stickies and wrote down the names of the fragrances they were mentioning. And if I had a fragrance that was on several different lists, I either blind bought or I got a decant. I started off with decants. I have a huge collection of decants still to this day because that's what I did. I got my decants, and if I liked it, then I searched for a deal on a full bottle.
Okay, cool. Now, I'm kind of watching the comments fly by, and I know personally, would you be able to, when we're done here, send me a DM with all those houses that you want people to start at? Because I know probably a lot of people, especially in my community, who aren't in the wet or not in the fragrance community per se, would like to know where to start. So when we're done here, can you send me those?
I will.
Perfect. Do you have anything else? I always ask everybody this towards the end of the interview, whether it's a company or somebody like you, where do you want to see yourself a year from now? If we're sitting here doing another conversation, where do you want to be at this point in your life?
I want a year from now, I definitely want to still be doing what I'm doing and still be in value in the community. I still want to be leading change. I still want to be a pillar of the fragrance community. I would love to perhaps work with a perfumer, on a fragrance. I've got some ideas. So I would love to perhaps, dabble with that. And I want to be able to perhaps coach people on what I did to really help my growth, because there are many different communities with people that have the same passion and drive that I have. And, I had to figure this all out. There was no magic, wand to say, boom, Mr. Cologne, here you go.
There's no Instagram for dummies.
No, I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but you really have to spend the time learning your craft and further enhancing. And, I am continually changing the way I do things to try to make it better, like continually, because the moment you do, you become irrelevant.
For sure. Absolutely. Excuse me. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and chat with me, educate all of us, and myself included. If I'm being a little greedy here, I kind of brought you on because I wanted to pick your brain a little bit, but I wanted everybody to benefit. So obviously, I'm very, very, caught up in what I'm doing now. But fragrances are a huge thing to me now. I do have one more question for you before I forget. Do you think there is any truth or scientific knowledge behind pheromones in fragrances? Do you think that's a marketing thing? Do you think that really matters?
I don't put a lot of stock in it. It's not something that's touted in the fragrances that I enjoy. There was one fragrance called Pheromones when I was like in my 20s. I never owned it. The smell didn't smell that incredible to me. I think pheromones is a real thing, but I don't think it's something that perfumers are slipping into fragrances, because as a perfume lover, I don't smell a fragrance on a woman and she seems, more sexually attractive because of a perfume. It doesn't work that way. If anything, I like a fragrance. If she's attractive, she's attractive, but I've never smelled something and it made me think that someone was more appealing. You know what I mean? If my girl wears certain fragrances, that's different. That's my girl. I'm attracted to her. But in general, I don't, I'm never at work and smell something on someone, and like that doesn't work that way for me.
Great.
So
I'm glad you were able to answer that for me, because there's so much marketing, there's so much hype. People are trying to differentiate themselves, and I've fallen victim to a lot of that stuff. I tend to buy with my eyes, or I'm a sucker for a good backstory. And so I've seen stuff like that. I'm thinking, how much does that really matter? How can you chemically put something in a cologne that's really going to make women all of a sudden attracted to you out of nowhere? And I was just kind of curious how that worked. I did see somebody also mention, is there a particular shelf life for fragrances? Have you noticed? Does stuff tend to get better with age? Does some stuff maybe get more rancid with age?
I can't really say that I've experienced fragrances getting better with age. I have had a few fragrances go bad on me. Some of them I bought used, so I don't know how well they were cared for in their first life. But fragrances, if taken care of, they last an incredibly long time, like, 50, 60 years. Okay. So they have a long shelf life. That being said, if you use a lot of fragrance from a bottle, every time you spray fragrance, air gets into the atomizer. So when you have air in that bottle, that air will oxidize the fragrance with time.
Yeah, air is the enemy, right?
Yeah, it's inevitable. It's oxidization process you can't really beat.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, Mr. Cologne, Glenn, I appreciate you coming on and gracing us with your knowledge and dropping us all on us. Is there anything else you want to promote about your channel? Anything else people can or should be looking forward to coming up on your page? Anything you've got going on in the works?
Oh, sure. First, I want to say thank you for having me on. This was really nice to do something like this and not have to do any kind of work beforehand. I'm usually in your situation. Yeah. So thank you for the invitation. I really, really appreciate this. It was nice. It was nice to, sit here and answer questions. As far as my page, if any of your followers are looking to, dabble in the niche perfume world, I have a very engaging page. I do a conversation every Sunday. It's called Scent Provoking Sunday. There are giveaways on there usually. And there's a community of people that love to talk about fragrances. They share information about new perfume houses. They talk amongst each other, and it's a very welcoming community. You come on in, and you are welcome. So if you're looking to really get involved in the community, I think my account is a great pillar, a great segue into the fragrance community, and you will meet other wonderfully talented and passionate people. So
that's incredible.
I would say,
guys, thanks to Glenn for coming out for Mr. Cologne. If you're not following him, I highly recommend it. This dude is a genius when it comes to fragrances and breaking stuff down. Like I said, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm very honored to have you on my channel, and let's do this again.
Yes, certainly. And one more thing. I want to send you some samples. So I'm going to have another conversation with you to kind of pick your brain about what you like. I have a plethora of fragrances, and I want to be able to send you some things that I know you would like and some things that may challenge you to like. So
I'm looking forward to that. We'll talk after this.
Yes,
Thanks again, Glenn.
Thank you for
having me. I appreciate you very much, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys, for watching. This was amazing. I'm glad you tuned in for Mr. Cologne. I had a great time, and I will catch you in the next interview. Love you all.